No matter how strong the agency is, no matter how strong the brand is, everyone needs accountability. And in a great partnership, you're holding each other accountable.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Highlight of Business podcast for e-commerce entrepreneurs. And I'm excited today to introduce my new friend, Ed Poppe. And Ed's a marketing legend. Ed's got an incredible resume that includes stops at La Quinta, American Airlines, Tempur Sealy, and Build-A-Bear. And secret, he actually is a guy that can confirm that I used to own a barbecue restaurant because he ate it when it was a thing. And it's not just some random thing I talk about on the podcast. So he is a eyewitness, and I love that. But the cool thing about Ed now is that he's launched his own business, Poppe Marketing, and they're helping, $30 to $300 million businesses grow their revenue with proven digital marketing strategies. Ed, man, welcome to the show.
Chandler, so happy to be here. And it's great to think about Lexington again. My family and I loved eating at your restaurant. Just really cool to reconnect. I loved Lexington.
The world is such a small place, and it's wild because
is.
I met somebody here in Cincinnati now that I live here, and she was like, "Oh, you gotta meet this guy named Ed. He's got a ton of marketing experience. You guys would really get along." And I was like, "Fantastic! I love to meet other smart marketers." And then you and I got on the phone, and I found out you were in Lexington right around the same time I was there slinging barbecue, and lo and behold, you had come to the restaurant. So I appreciate your patronage and the fact that you can prove that it was a real thing.
I can. I have such admiration for you. You're on this journey of multiple entrepreneurial moments, and you're building it and you're figuring it out, and lots of respect headed your way.
Man, well, it's right back to you, man, because you're this guy that has this incredible resume like I just laid out. And I'd love to know, first question here, like, why strike out and start your own thing and not just go find another major player to go market for?
I've always had it in my heart. So I have this side of me that's creative. My mom was a librarian, my dad was a banker, and a part of me always wanted to find consumer stories, and a part of me always really liked businesses. And on my birthday this year, my wife gave me a water bottle, and it literally says Poppe Marketing. And it was my cue, like, go out on your own, do this. I've been following a group called Bootstrap Giants that's all about how do you bootstrap and get yourself launched. And one of the things they talk a lot about is putting a product out there and testing it. And lots of respect for that. I'm trying to do the same thing. I'm on iteration 2 or 3. And what I believe in is the formulas and the playbooks, and what I've seen really helps companies. And that's what I'm helping others figure out.
Yeah, I love that. And I got a lot of questions about marketing stuff and your expertise within that space. But I'd love to know first, before we do that, is it weird to put on a different hat and sort of change gears from time to time, where you got to go like, okay, this is Poppe Marketing and this is what we need for marketing and sales strategies now, versus like $100 million business has totally different problems and resources to be able to solve problems with?
The playbook's the same. So I'm wearing the same hat that I wore on the brand side, except I'm doing that in a fractional part-time capacity. And in some cases, I bring in resources to help a company out. Let's be honest, it's a different way to run your life. There's a much larger sales component than I had to do when I was brand side. So I'm having to learn how to build a business, how to generate a pipeline for myself, not necessarily for a brand. And with that, I mean, also, let's be super transparent, like, comes some imposter syndrome. And I think what I fall back to is the expertise and the roadmaps that I've learned I know work. Like, no doubt they've worked. Lots of brands have examples of these playbooks working, and I have lots of experience of that. And so I just want to help others out and bring that same playbook to them.
Well, if a guy like you has imposter syndrome, that makes me feel way better about my own self. And, if you can have imposter syndrome, we all can. I think you give us all the pass. So, well, you've mentioned the playbook a couple of times. I'd love to know sort of, does it change for each individual company, or is it more or less the same across the board? And if so, like, what is the playbook for you?
Yeah, the parts are the same. So I have 2 elements of the playbook. One is an acquisition side. And so it starts with, the brands often have a goal of, let's capture people in digital channels. Let's get them to think about us in a different way. That think might be an action. It might be a view. It might be a conversion. And then let's follow up with them so that they tell other people. And so the parts of that are, let's capture them with great digital marketing. Let's run Meta, Google, TikTok, the different channels according to best practices. That includes mobile first, creative that's optimized, creative testing. Let's land them on a landing page that's really optimized for conversion. There's some wonderful resources out there. How do you build a conversion optimized landing page? And then if we collect the leads, let's follow up with them with great email marketing. And then on the other side, I help brands think about retention. What's in our database? Who are our consumers? What attributes do we know? If we got them back one more time, what would inspire them to come back? And depending on the brand's capabilities, stack of tools, there are different ways you can approach that. But the fundamentals are also the same. You need great execution, you need a plan, and you need creative that's optimized for the user and the consumers. So those templates become how do we look at different businesses and help them unlock their next step.
Do you think churn is more and retention is more important than acquisition? Like, or do you think it just depends on a case by case basis for each company you work with?
I think it's each company. I think it's what industry are you in? How long does it take someone to get to a purchase? There are a lot of variables.
Gotcha. I love that.
But the truth is, look at whatever your initiative is and think about, are you taking simple actions that are optimized for what's best for the tools that you're operating in? And you will see success. It's great execution, great messaging on either side of the coin.
That's awesome. Well, I feel like I have a lot to learn here, but I'd love to know early on.
Both of us, Chandler.
Well, when you launch Poppe Marketing's podcast, I'll be guest number one. I'm happy to be the guinea pig for you.
I'd love it.
I was trying to talk you into it before the show started, but
love it.
maybe we'll have that announcement in part 2 when we do another episode together. But the your career, I mean, you've got this big long track record. You've done a lot of things. Like, is there a story early on in your career where you thought to yourself, like, wow, like this is the power of marketing, and it's like really exemplified by that moment?
I have a few moments, but I go back to La Quinta. La Quinta for me was a forming moment. I think when you're early in your career, you're learning from everyone. And in that experience, both within the brand and on the partner side, I can name countless people who I consider role models for how I wanted to craft and behave in my career. And one of the examples in La Quinta was the loyalty program, because I got to be a part and impact a ride where loyalty was driving a very low percentage of the hotel revenue. And when La Quinta went public in 2014, it was driving a very high percentage of revenue. And seeing how that work happened both on the loyalty team, with the operations team, with the franchise team, with the marketing team, it was lots of teams working together. But at the end of the day, it was consumer stories, it was optimized marketing, and it was a passion brand. And for me, those are the elements that I think can really move the needle.
Yeah, I love that. If you're entering a space now with owning your own agency, though, where there's so much competition. I mean, hell, like Hy-Vee Marketing's technically an agency, even though we don't do the same thing you do. We come in and execute pieces of the plan. We don't really put the plan together. But how are you approaching this new company to like make it different based on your previous experiences? And I mean, you and I have talked before, you've worked with dozens of other agencies. So like you kind of seen what it looks like to do it really well and what it looks like to do poorly.
So what I'm focused on right now is let's do an evaluation. It's 30 days. And with that, you get a short-term roadmap. This is not a 1 or a 2-year plan. It's 6 months. Next 3 months, with the tools that you have or some simple additions, what can we do to unlock customers and drive revenue fast? And then the next part of my offering is, do you need someone to help drive that plan? You can hire me to do that. Or I can bring in a team that will help you act and move fast. And it comes back to the potholes that I saw in my career, which is short-term roadmaps help companies move much faster. And we know this with behavior change too, that if you start to take small steps forward, the ball that you're rolling becomes much, much larger. It will go down the hill much, much faster. And ultimately, you're going to get the revenue outcome that you want.
Hmm.
And then on the piece of bringing in great resources, I'm lucky to know a lot of great people in my network. That includes you, that I can call on and help me solve problems.
Yeah. Well, I have another question too, but I want to go back really quick. How short is short timeline that you're looking at? Because I like the idea of like, what is it, Parkinson's law, that the task will expand to fit whatever timeline you allow it to. Like, how short is it? A quarter? Is it a month? Is it 6 months? What do you guys do?
You can do a lot in a quarter. The first month, depending on how prepared you're to move fast, the first month is thinking about what do I do next. It's having conversations. It's looking at what the tech stack is, and it's
Mm,
having real conversations on what are your resource ability. Because ultimately, it comes down to your ability to prioritize and your ability to dedicate resources to make some next steps.
yeah.
For a brand that wants to move super fast, you try to line up the resources right away, but you're still probably not activating anything for 30 days. And so
Mm,
the results are going to happen in month 2 and month 3.
got it. So it's like the company in that instance, they've got to have a much longer time horizon versus like, I'm just trying to make this happen by next Friday. I feel like sometimes we run into entrepreneurs, and this may be more of a high beam thing where we're working with a lot of
Yeah.
founders, and they're very like driven and go getters, and they want to do all the things, and like they think things should happen in 1 week cycles, and we're trying to explain to them like, hey, this thing that you want done at a higher caliber level than what you can do with Canva and like, playing around hitting buttons inside of Google, like this is going to take time to do. So how do you set expectations, or I guess how would you advise Hybeam, now that I'm getting a free consulting call out of this podcast? How would
I love
you
it.
advise us to set those expectations with the people that like, hey, like quality stuff like this takes time, like, and you're going to burn a lot of money if you don't like set this up the right way on the front end, even though it may delay results slightly.
So I heard two things in your question, like burning money and then two, setting expectations. If you can start your project with a clear roadmap and there's alignment on where the resources are,
Mm,
I think you're going to be okay.
yeah.
And it needs to be like, let's take paid search, super clear at day one what team is restructuring the account and relaunching the campaigns. So let's say you move very fast. Week 1 is your evaluation. Week 2 is your restructure. Week 3, you launch.
Mm,
All right. So you're entering a moment of learning, some early optimization. You're probably not having impact till week 4, 5, or 6.
mm-hmm.
And let's just be really clear on that. But the good news is you're going to unlock your customers and your revenue in 3 months versus being in the same place a year later.
That's right. Yeah. One thing we've done to mitigate that, there's two things we've done. One is we have a 90-day minimum for all of our contracts. So like it kind of goes beyond the timeline you're talking about there, where it's like it gives us a month to get everything onboarded and launched, gives us a month to optimize, and then 1 month to like really start driving results. And the other good thing about having a 90-day window like that is that, we're a very communicative agency. And so we are constantly like pinging people like on weekly reports and weekly update emails. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard in sales calls, like, I don't really know what this agency's doing. I haven't talked to them in 3 months, but every time I hear from them, everything's going fine. So I don't know. And I've taken a lot of business that way. How important is communication for you because you are the middleman almost. You are the node between the company that is spending millions of dollars and the agencies that are out there trying to execute this plan. Like, how do you handle communication, and what do you think is important to communicate to the different teams out there?
So I do have engagements where I'm like in the accounts building, but typically I am in between. And I think the key is to have alignment on the roadmap. What's the framework for measurement and the structures for conversations? And to repeat that pattern every time you meet. So there's no surprise to the teams on what the conversation is and where it's going. And everyone needs accountability. So no matter how strong the agency is, no matter how strong the brand is, everyone needs accountability. And in a great partnership, you're holding each other accountable. It's the person on the brand that's saying, hey, I went into Google Analytics, feels like we've dropped a little bit with our direct to site traffic. Help me think through that. I've noticed, the paid social retargeting campaign is driving a lot more traffic than it used to. Help me understand what's happening. And on the agency side, there's accountability too. We really needed that creative from you, and we can't deliver the roadmap unless we get it. So I think in a great partnership, both sides are holding each other accountable.
I love the question, help me understand that. I think that's really powerful. And then having the wisdom to be quiet on the back end of it and say,
Yeah.
let me just hear what this person's going to say before I just interject my own thoughts and opinions, because that's really what I'm trying to do. I mean, that's what bad leaders, I think, want to do a lot of times. I want to go back to the acquisition versus retention thing that you talked about earlier when we're talking about the roadmaps here. I'd love to know, like, on both sides of that coin, are there a couple big problems that really stick out and that we could share with the audience here that maybe like, oh, I do have that problem, and then that way they know to actually need
Yeah.
to reach out to you?
But I don't even know if you need to reach out to me. I'm happy to help. I would love to help you grow faster. But first one is, are your campaigns set to optimize for a real conversion?
Mm-hmm.
The algorithms are going to be really good at finding whatever you set them to. If that's impressions, if it's clicks. But if it's not conversion, you're not getting, especially if you need fast growth, you're not getting what you want. The second thing is, where are you landing people? Is it matching the message that your consumer cares about?
Mm.
Like, is it clear that you're a solution, or are you speaking loudly as the brand?
Mm.
And then three, is your conversion tracking set up appropriately? And I would say those three guides, like, how did you set up your campaigns and what are they optimized for? Where do you land people? Is it clear to a consumer what you solve and what action to take? And three, is your tracking right?
Mm. You'll enjoy this horror story. So we early on realized how important, actual attributable revenue and all the things are, and so we added Martech into our service stack, right? And it's included whatever it's part of it. But we get this new account, and they come in, and we're going through the audit. We got this 200-point checklist we take people through. I'm sure you do something similar, where it's our roadmap essentially. Where we're going, hey, this is
Yeah.
what the first 90 days is gonna be. We're just fixing all this stuff that's broken, and we go in and we audit this guy's account, and we find out that the agency he was working with, first off, they were like outsourcing a bunch of stuff overseas to the cheapest ad buyer they could get. It's a whole big nightmare. But he told us, he was like, I just can't get past this certain return on ad spend. Like, I don't know why. Like, every time I try to scale the ads, the revenue doesn't go up, but the return on ad spend goes down. And so, like, that's telling me we have there's some major issue here. Come to find out, they had set up tracking to, it was basically every time a person landed on the page from the ad, it was counting as a conversion event with a dollar
Yeah.
amount. And so this agency had done
So
like
you're
the most.
optimizing for clicks, right?
Yeah, well, not even that. They were optimizing for clicks, but they were also counting it as revenue. So it was making it look like it wasn't just what was cost per click. It was like return on ad spend was like 20x. And I
Amazing.
remember when he was
Yeah.
talking to us, he was like, "Yeah, man, I'm getting like a 20x return on ad spend." I was like, "Dude, I don't think I could beat that, but I would love to audit your account just so I can learn what they're doing, because obviously they're better at what they do than we are." And we go in and find out, like, oh, that's how they're getting to 20x, is because it's all fabricated nonsense. And so they've been a customer now for a while, and it's worked out. But I do find it interesting that how many times there's these professional media buyers, especially out there, that come in and they say, "Hey, I know what I'm doing," and then you look and see what like, to your point, the three things you just laid out, they miss all three of them, and I just don't. I'm just dumbfounded. I don't really know what to do with that.
Yeah. I don't, the good news is we don't have to solve it,
Mm,
but we just know what the structure is to set clients and brands up for success.
yeah. I love that. Well, you mentioned earlier your first time, like, you had a real marketing campaign take off, and like you were like, "Oh wow, this marketing thing is really powerful," with the La Quinta story. Do you have a favorite story? Like, what's your favorite marketing win across all your different excursions, I'll say, in your career?
Oh, I have a few. Um, At La Quinta, one thing we did, everyone thinks about the loyalty program, but you also have known guests who aren't part of the loyalty program. And we did segmentation and created direct mail and email just for those guests.
Mm.
And it was really impactful. And we tested different messages. So anytime that we're thinking about composition and testing different messages, count me in. I love that.
That's cool.
At Temper, we built out, totally restructured our brand search campaigns. This was, gosh, a long time ago in 2015. And it made a huge impact, noticeable incremental impact to the business. Brand search is a hot button topic, but that was a really cool proof of concept. And we ultimately then moved into paid social. We got to see direct response TV work very well.
Mm.
And then at Build a Bear, multiple instances where the team came together and had a big impact on the business. So anytime that people rally to a problem and drive a measurable impact, that's a favorite story for me.
I love that. You said something interesting in there that I gotta drill down on. I guess is the saying. Branded search. What are your opinions on branded search? I'd love to know.
I think it's important to have a presence. And then you have to think about what industry the brand is in.
Mm.
They're very competitive, commoditized industries where there's a ton of competition. And unfortunately, it becomes more important to pay for brand search. Now, that said, what's your SEO strategy? How optimized are you? There's a lot of ways to control your spend.
Mm.
So every brand situation is unique. Like, are you a commodity? Do you own your brand? If you own your brand, you don't have to compete as much for it. Um, so what have I learned? It's important, but it's a slippery slope.
Mm. Yeah, I think it was Uber, maybe their CMO or somebody up there high in the Uber land. They said that they essentially are saving like some 25 or $30 million a year. I read this a couple months ago, so the numbers may be wrong, but essentially they're just turning off all the branded search stuff. And I don't know. On one hand, I understand like Uber's a really well-known brand. If you're searching for Uber, you're probably searching for Uber. But if I'm Lyft in that scenario and I know you've turned off your branded search, like I'm going to do everything I
Your
can.
campaigns are great, right? They're totally optimized. They're amazing. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
like how you think.
Yeah, I'm thinking Lyft is like, hey, what offer could I put in place? What cheeky sort of like title tag could I put in there where it's like, hey, is Uber living you like whatever the problems Uber has, like just call it out in the title, and then maybe you can like steal some of their business and they'll have to turn it back on. It's almost like we see this with smaller companies at least a lot of times, and this is maybe a little bit broader marketing conversation, and I'd love to know what you think about it. It's like I'll have people that want to turn all the ads off or turn their marketing activities off
Yeah,
because there may be a temporary dip in the market or a temporary dip in cash flow. And then they'll look at their P&L and they'll go, oh, hey, everything was fine. Everything was the same. But then there's this sort of like slow fall off for a
there
lot of
is.
these $1 to $10 million
Yep.
businesses. And then there's a rapid fall off. And then they call us back and they're like, oh, no, it's all broken. And I'm like,
Yeah, you're out of it for like 3 to 6 weeks when you
yeah,
do that.
yeah.
What I love, and there's some great technologies out there. There's some really good consultants who are just specializing in measurement. They're great agencies. But match market testing, where you identify a set of markets and you treat them differently than a comparable set, and you truly measure what happens, there's a lot to be learned. So you talked about brand search, great example for match market testing. And then here's the asterisk: just recognize that your learning is point in time. Your learning is what was happening in that season, what was your message, what was your creative. So you get a great learning, but it doesn't mean that tomorrow or a year later that the learning will be the same.
Yeah, you'll love this story, Ed. With the barbecue restaurant, I wasn't that sophisticated. I was very busy running the barbecue restaurant and I was teaching myself marketing
You
on
were
the side.
scrappy though, like you were
It
figuring it out.
You got to figure it out. That's right. And so we were basically running Facebook ads very early on. I mean, it was very early in that
Love it.
product. I mean, I can't even believe we used to get $5 to reach 10,000 people. It was a great problem to have. But I didn't even know how to set up tracking. And so I was the world's worst at that. And I basically just set a pin on the restaurant, put like a 5 mile radius around it. And I just said, send it. And I was like, how much can I afford to spend? Like 3, 4, 5 grand. And then there would be some months where I would turn it off And like that story I just told about the P&L slipping slowly over time, I lived that. And it was basically like for 3 months, it was like, I don't know if marketing's working or not. But like month 4, it was almost always this way, especially our larger catering orders, like that real top of the mind stuff. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I got this party coming up. I need to call somebody to cater. We really saw a hit in that stuff. And so we weren't able to do like massive city to city or market to market tests, but just by turning it off and like paying attention inside of the inside of the region that is, central Kentucky, like we really felt it. And so I don't know, it's really hard to stay. I don't care how big your brand is. Even McDonald's has this problem. Even Coca-Cola has this problem. Like as big as their brands are, as popular as they are, they still run ads to stay top of mind and to solve those problems. So I know you're a big tracking guy and you're a big measurement guy. Like how do you juxtapose the branding, top of mind awareness stuff with the converting ads as well?
I think you need all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you need to develop a marketing strategy that's appropriate for the size of your business and how much you spend a month, and then test into those channels.
Mm,
For
yeah.
example, there may be times of the year where YouTube's not as effective. But if you're in a peak demand season and you want to remind people that you're the choice, YouTube, amazing. I've seen YouTube work incredibly well.
Yeah.
So I think it's difficult and not necessarily dangerous, but maybe you can waste some time to say this is exactly the formula for every company.
Mm-hmm.
But you were just mentioning Meta. I mean, I can think of high growth company research that I've seen that ranks Meta at the top for channels that drive impact. And everyone's super excited about TikTok. I'm super excited about TikTok. Meta's like, if you can run Meta, think about it, keep optimizing it. There's a lot of stories of that having a big impact.
Yeah. The death of Meta has been greatly dramatized, I feel like. And I understand where the TikTok stuff comes from because it's the same thing where the YouTube excitement comes from, where you look at a daily user number or the daily time on platform number. TikTok, the last time I saw it was like 2 hours a day for a lot of their users, like, which is a crazy amount of time. But then you go, okay, who is that stealing time from? And really, they're stealing time from Netflix, from cable. It's just another like radio. It's another um, media consumption channel, not so much a competitor to Facebook necessarily. It is, but it isn't at the same time. It's much more broad than that. And I think to your point, you just have to have a specific reason for running ads on those different platforms. YouTube's the same way, where YouTube is still one of the strongest channels, but um, you got to know why you're going there. Awareness is a great reason there, but I've seen a lot of conversion stuff work there as well. So
Yeah, I
in
mean,
yeah, go for it.
just some quick thoughts on TikTok. If this group, this listener base hasn't checked out TikTok's golden formula, like it is a great layout of how do you do your hook, how do you do your message, how do you do your CTA. Consumers are searching on TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's super important for brands to think about how are they answering the question
Mm,
on TikTok, because
yeah.
search is for sure happening on TikTok. And then we talked about measurement, and there's a lot to be learned just by talking to your customers.
Mm,
Hey, where did you first hear about us? Doing a quick survey. And if people start saying TikTok, even if the attribution isn't there,
mm-hmm.
that's a clue for your business.
You'll love this, Ed. My barbecue restaurant, I worked the register every single day, Ed. And you know what I asked everybody that came in the restaurant? Welcome in. Is this your first time? And if they said yes, they always got this question next. How'd you hear about us?
Good
And
for you.
and every single time, almost, I mean, 70% of the time, it was, oh, so and so told me, word of mouth referral, that kind of thing, which is good. I see that now as like product market fit. People are doing the advertising for you for free. That's old school humanity. Like, that's okay.
It's
The
great.
second most popular thing, and we were running tons of ads in different places, it was I saw it on Facebook. And I didn't even have a way to track it other than like point of sale, like converting ads to dollars in the moment. And like, yeah, there's something to that like anecdotal data where you're just getting a feeling for talking to your customers and you see a trend line where you're like, I talked to this guy and this guy and this guy, and they all mentioned they saw this thing on YouTube
Yeah,
and
love
or they
it.
saw it on TikTok or whatever. And then you go, oh, hey, maybe this thing is working and all attribution can't be tracked. It's we got to go old school healthy marketing mix, you know?
Yeah, and I love the fact that you were the founder asking the question, and thinking about how do I optimize this for my business.
Yeah.
Like, you're curious. You're not prescribing a solution. You're not assuming that it's not someone you read on X that like says this is the playbook. Like, you're curious. You're hearing really what's happening to your business. Love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there was I got interviewed I got to ask a question and talk to John Taffer and Gary Vaynerchuk for like 20 minutes on his show when it was real popular.
Amazing.
And it
Yeah,
was
that's
fun.
big.
And John Taffer gave good advice, but his advice was like pre-digital world. And it was
Mm-hmm.
fascinating. I went and looked at it and I said, okay, he wants to get people to come in 3 times and that sort of makes them a permanent customer. And so I figured out how to do it digitally to where it was like, all right, you come in once, I get your email, then I give you a free this and a free this. And every time you come in, you get the next free offer. And then we'd get you in 3 times. And if you go back and listen to that, his advice was like, you get a napkin or a business card and you write the gift on there, you give it to them, and you do that 3 times in a row. And then that gets them to come back, yada, yada. And so it's interesting what you said there. I think there's something about if you want to be a good marketer in today's world, you have to be really like a scientist and not
Yeah.
necessarily a smart or official testing like scientists. There's a lot of people that can get really into the like, we got to have real hypothesis and this and that. And it's all dependent on how big your team is and your resource base, like you mentioned earlier. But I do agree that you have to approach everything with an open hand and go like, I have this idea. We're going to test it in a small way, see if it
Love it.
lands, and if it does, we're going all in. I don't know if that applies to what you're talking about too, but that's what came to my mind.
No, I love that. I love that. And I just heard, I was looking it up really quick, but I heard this great quote um, that essentially, oh, here it is. It's by Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And that if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late.
Hell yeah. That's it.
Because
That's it. Yeah. After
I
this, I'll
want
show you the
perfection,
secret.
right? And that's the imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Full
Is
circle,
like,
man.
oh, I haven't tweaked this enough for you. It's not deserving of your time. And dude, you just got to try some stuff.
You just got to let it rip. That's right.
So I'm trying to do that.
I love it, man. Well, that's full circle. Well, before we let you get out of here, man, I'd love to know, like, what are you seeing on the horizon? Like, what are the big marketing trends coming down the road that you're really excited about testing and treating like a scientist?
I can't wait to see what happens with AI content
Yeah.
and personalization. I'm super excited to see where that goes.
Mm.
I'm also really interested to see how shopping funnels change on websites.
Mm.
I think that there's going to continue to be change there.
What is the change that's happening, you think, like where it's at now versus where you think it's going to go?
I don't want to venture a guess. There are a lot of people who are much smarter in the CRO space and have dedicated their careers to building direct-to-consumer e-commerce sites.
Yeah.
I'm excited to watch.
All right. Well, that'd be a good question for me to ask the next CRO guy I have on the show. That's good to know. I'll be like, Ed wants to know what's coming in. What's the change in the sales funnel? I love that, Ed. Well, what's your big ask, man? What can we do? And our audience, how can we help you? What can we do to support?
So I'm starting out. I've got the knowledge, I've got the roadmaps, the experience. My brain is an analyst at heart. My goal is to help brands win.
I love that.
And so what I'm going out there is looking to meet founders, to help people out with revenue evaluations. My target is companies between 30 million and 300 million, but happy to talk to anyone in the 10 million range. And if I can help provide any advice or guidance, let me know.
I love that. Well, Ed, I appreciate you giving me an hour's worth of advice and guidance here. That's why I do the podcast. It's like free therapy or free consulting stuff, and then I chop it up for the internet. Now it becomes free for everybody. So this is amazing.
This is fun. You have good energy, Chandler.
Oh,
so love what you're doing.
Thanks, Ed. I appreciate it. The smoker didn't get me, not too much smoke in the brain. I still can think clearly. It's okay. I've cleaned it all out since then.
I can tell you're still tweaking your recipe.
That's it. The tweaking the recipe. That's right. That's exactly right. Well, Ed, we appreciate you joining us, man. We appreciate everybody that's out there listening. We will see you next week.